Hello everyone, welcome back to the part 9 of the age of industrialization. In the previous unit, we discussed about the emergence of factories in India. Now we'll find out the peculiarities of industrial growth. What were the special things in the industrial growth of India? What were the conditions that we'll discuss? The topics that we'll discuss today are the peculiarities of industrial growth, growth of Indian industries due to the First World War, and how small scale industries predominate. The expectations from this video lesson are you would be able to summarize the peculiarities of industrial growth in India. After the end of the video lesson, you would be able to analyze the emergence of Indian industries during the First World War and evaluate the importance of small scale industries even after the emergence of factories. Now let's talk about the peculiarities of Indian industries. What were the specialities? What were the key factors of Indian industries? So we have 5 particular points in this mind map that you would need to follow. The first peculiarity is very clear that Indian industries were managed by European managing agencies. As you remember that we discussed that Indian industrialists were not allowed to establish their factories directly. They had to invest, they had to finance, and all the decisions were taken by European managing agencies. The three major European managing agencies were Bird, Hegler's and Company, Jardine Skinner and Company, and Andrew Yule. That's what we discussed in the previous video lesson. Now, the next point is they were interested in certain products. They were just interested in the products like tea, coffee, plantation, where there had been possibility of great profits, and they invested in that. Another thing, the Indian industrialists avoided all sort of competition from Manchester products. They got involved in the products which were not imported from Manchester. They did not want to have any competition with the Manchester products, as we have seen in the previous video lesson how Manchester got dominance, how Manchester established its local market, that was England, as well as the international market, India. And the Indian industrialists avoided the competition with the Manchester products. By the beginning of 20th century, very special, there had been change in the pattern of industrialization. Most importantly, as the Swadeshi movement gathered momentum, nationalists mobilized people to boycott foreign clothes. So industrial groups organized themselves to protect their collective interests, and they pressurized the government to increase tariff protection and grant other concession. So the pattern of industrialization undoubtedly changed because of Swadeshi movement, and people started buying Indian products. So that was a sentiment, as this sentiment was related with the Indian national movement as well. And hence, we find that there had been a shift in the pattern of industrialization. One more thing happened, that from 1906, moreover, the export of Indian yarn, Indian thread to China declined because China was flooded by the thread from the Japanese and Chinese market, Chinese production, and hence the import decline and the export declined for the Indian industrialists, and then Indian industrialists shifted from yarn production to fabric. So now they moved towards fabric, and that is why we get a figure that cotton piece goods production in India doubled between 1900 and 1912. Now let's relook to the change in pattern of industrialization. As we already discussed, we have the points here. By the first decade of the 20th century, a series of changes affected the pattern of industrialization. The first keyword that you need to keep in mind, as the Swadeshi movement gathered momentum, nationalists mobilized people to boycott foreign clothes. So people started boycotting foreign clothes and started purchasing Indian products. Industrial groups organized themselves to protect their collective interests. So they organized like union, and thereafter they pressurized the government to increase tariff protection, means the tax protection, and grant other concessions to them so that they can survive in the market. From 1906, moreover, that we discussed, export of Indian yarn to China declined since produced from Chinese and Japanese mills flooded the Chinese market, and hence industrialists in India began shifting from yarn to cloth production. And the figure here, very important HOTS question as well. Cotton piece goods production in India doubled between 1900 and 1912. You might get this question to justify the statement, and you have all the points here, right? Now let's see about the growth of Indian industries. The First World War between 1914 and 1918 undoubtedly was disastrous, and we have seen the, the huge loss of lives and property. However, for Indian industries, the First World War worked really well, and it became a boon for the Indian industries. It, in fact, boosted the Indian industries and helped the Indian industries to be established, to get established firmly. So let's see here how. We all have already discussed that till the First World War, industrial growth was slow. It was not fast for Indian industrialists. And the war created a dramatically new situation, a completely new situation, a paradigm shift for the Indian industries. What has happened? With British mills busy with war production to meet the needs of the army, Manchester imports into India declined. Since Britain was involved in the war, Manchester started producing goods for the war needs, and eventually the export to India gradually declined, abruptly declined, and because of this, the gap that was created in the Indian market, as the Manchester products were not coming to India, Indian industries got an opportunity to sell the products in the market, to grab the Indian market, and India got a huge market, a vast home market to supply. And as the war prolonged, Indian factories were called upon to supply for the war needs: jute bags, cloth for army uniforms, tents and leather boots, horse and mule saddles, and a host of other items as well. So one way, here also compare it what has happened with Manchester. Here, because of the First World War, Indian industries got the Indian market, and at the same moment they were called upon to supply for the war needs. And the important one we can see here: army uniforms, tents, leather boots, horse and mule saddles, and a host of other items, several items related to the war. And here, I believe you're already aware what mule is. Horse, you know. Mule is the offspring of a male donkey and a female horse. Horses and donkeys are different species with different number of chromosomes. However, a crossbreed, you can say, between a male donkey and female horse. Got it? Perfect. Now, the new factories were set up and old ones ran in multiple shifts. Now, the demand was there. Indian factories started working in shifts, and more number of workers were employed. Everyone was made to work longer hours, and over the war years, industrial production boomed. Indian industries boomed, and after the war as well, even in 1918, as the First World War ended, still, because the market was somehow captured, Manchester could not or could never recapture its old position. Now let's talk about the lost position of Manchester. After the war, Manchester could never recapture its old position in the Indian market. As we have already discussed, we understood the concept as well, and unable to modernize. We discussed this point earlier as well, that there was no dearth of labor, there was abundance of labor, so they were not employing machines to a great extent. So Britain was not completely modernized, and hence could not compete with the US, Germany and Japan. And thereafter the economy of Britain crumbled after the war. You can see here drastic change for England and of course Manchester. Cotton production collapsed, and exports of cotton cloth from Britain fell dramatically. So all the cotton production, Manchester, we have already discussed. So the exports of cotton cloth from Britain decreased to a great extent. And within the colonies India, local industrialists gradually consolidated their position. We have seen the position of India consolidated, became very strong about the Indian industrialists, substituting foreign manufacturers and capturing the home market. Got it? So the foreign manufacturers, they substituted and they captured the home market. Very important here. So understood the point, how Manchester lost its position. As you can see here, fly shuttle, you see the picture, you got the video. So fly shuttle, it is a mechanical device used for weaving, moved by means of ropes and pulleys. It places the horizontal threads called the weft and the vertical threads called the wrap. The invention of the fly shuttle made it possible for weavers to operate large looms and weave wide pieces of cloth. You can see here. So like a wrap, weaving was done, all the weaving that you see here. So it was a great invention, and it in fact speeded up the production for weaving. Now let's talk about the small scale industries. We talked a lot about all the industries that Indian industries flourish. Now the question is, what has happened to the small scale industries? So small scale industries predominate. With the rise of Indian industries, large scale industries, we should not think that the small scale industries perished or did not survive. It survived, it dominated. How and why? Let's see. The first thing, technological changes. We have already seen fly shuttle. So that helped a lot in the production process, in the process of weaving. Other innovations and inventions were there. So with the technological changes, several innovations were applied and inventions were applied that helped the small scale industries. And the next point, you understand very clearly, as you have gone through the previous videos, and in England also we have seen the importance of hand labor. So here understand that there was a stable demand of finer varieties. The varieties which were fine, which were good, always had its own special market, regardless of the fact that they were expensive. The high class people, any which ways, wanted finer varieties. Mills could not imitate intricate designs, the fine design, the complicated designs that could be done through hand, that could not be imitated by the mills. Hence the quality was good and there was stable demand for the handloom products. Other things, very important, famines or economic crisis failed to affect sale of expensive products like Banarsi saris, Baluchari saris. So these are the products for high class people. So if there is economic recession or economic issues, that did not affect the high class people, and the demand of those high class products was stable. Because if we talk about economic crisis, so during that period, even today, as you can correlate, as we are in a lockdown, that what middle class would do would stop purchasing clothes. Not a problem if they would not have money. But for high class people, it doesn't matter how much the cost of the product is. Another point, certain weavers in a better position. There were weavers who were in a better position. So despite the high or exorbitant cost of the yarn, they were able to purchase that, and because they survived and they were able to sell the products in the market and earn money easily, right? You can see the picture here, a hand-woven cloth. The intricate designs of hand-woven cloth could not be easily copied by the mills, as we discussed earlier. You can see how fine it is. It was not easy to imitate. It was not easy to duplicate. So while factory industries grew steadily after the war, large industries formed only a small segment of the economy. Most of them, about 67% in 1911, were located in Bengal and Bombay. We'll see the map as well. That is important for internal examination for the PT1 as well. So most of them were located in Bengal and Bombay. Over the rest of the country, small-scale production continued to predominate. Only a small proportion of the total industrial labor force worked in registered factories, 5% in 1911 and 10% in 1931. So most of the production again here in India as well, you can see, was done in the small scale industries, in the cottage industries. The rest worked in a small workshops and household units, as we discussed, often located in alleys and by-lanes, like between the apartments, the narrow lane that we call alleys and by-lanes, invisible to the passerby, or at different locations, the workers were working. In fact, in some instances, handicrafts production actually expanded in the 20th century. Other reasons we can correlate, that is with the advent of Swadeshi movement. This is true even in the case of the handloom sector that we have discussed. While cheap machine made thread wiped out the spinning industry in the 19th century, the weavers survived despite problems. As we discussed on the previous slide, that okay, some weavers were in a better position because there was stable demand, and even with the high prices of the thread, they were able to purchase. And in the 20th century, handloom cloth production expanded steadily, almost trebling between 1900 and 1940. So three times the production increased, the cloth production increased. There's a hot question also. You might get this sentence that in the 20th century, handloom cloth production expanded steadily, almost trebling between 1900 and 1940. Justify the statement. You would have to go with all these points. The keywords are already written there on the previous slide that we discussed, and you need to just explain. Now observe the map of India showing location of large-scale industries in India, 1931. This map is very important for the map work. The circles indicate the sizes of industries in the different regions. You can see here, this would be called small scales, medium, small, and this is the large scale central provinces. You can see here small scale, and further big industries, and Bombay large scale industries. So if we talk about the large scale industries in Bengal and in Bombay, right? Now we have the assignment questions for you. You can see all the assignment questions, note down all the questions, all the answers you would get in the description as we discussed, and you would be able to answer with the help of all the keywords and the points. Write down all the notes in your notebook, answer all the assignment questions. Thank you and have a great day.